If you prepare yourself for a series of gunfire. You may be seated.
Francis, want some juice?
Rest in peace. I'd like to say a prayer in the beginning of this service. Dear Heavenly Father, in your hands are the souls of the living and the dead. Remember, O God, we pray you, the soul of our departed comrade, and conduct it into the place you have prepared for it. Your heavenly kingdom, bestow your blessings and extend your healing power to those of the family members who are still suffering from the tragedy of death of a loved one. Lift up your hearts of those burdened with the sorrow. Unto your name be the glory and the honor forever and ever. Amen.
Thank you, Corey. Appreciate you all being here today. My dad was a funny man, and he only had one thing to say about religion. My family knows what it is. I'm an atheist, swear to God. Sorry. That's who he was. So I'm Shelby Joseph Lewis. We're here today for my dad, Shelby Wesley Lewis. He was born in West Virginia, June 16th, 1939, to Cozy Dove and Owen Lewis. He spent his early years in West Virginia with his twin sister Shelda and his brothers Bob and Arnold. And he grew up in a large extended family with with many cousins among the Hatchers, the Lillies, the Mills, and the Walkers. He had fond memories of all those times. Where he grew up is still there, and every year that family still gathers for a reunion on the 4th of July. For the 4th of July. This year, my mom and I will be taking his remains to be buried alongside his sister in the family cemetery. His only remaining sibling is his brother Orv, the last of the Lewises from that generation. Orv was 10 years younger, but he had a great relationship with my dad, and a lot of you have probably met him because he showed up here every year to help out and visit with family. The family moved to Lockport about 13 when my dad was 13, and that's where he met my mom when he was 16. And he joined the Army in 1958, and was it 58, 57, and you guys got married in 58. They got married on April the 2nd, 1958. He wanted to get married on April Fool's Day, but she wouldn't let him. So he joined the Army. See, out of basic, he went to carpentry school, and then he wound up in the South Pacific in the Marshall Islands, and that's where he became an atomic veteran. And when he left there, he became a truck driver and spent the early 1960s in France. And then when he left there, he was stationed in Fort Bliss in the mid-60s till about 72. He went to Korea for a year, and we moved to Northeast El Paso. And when he returned, he stayed till about 1976 and moved to Germany. We were there till 79, and then he got stationed at White Sands Missile Range, where he was there till 1983 when he retired. In 1982, they built a house here in Las Cruces, and built a house in Cruces in 1983. And after he retired, he did a couple of different jobs, but the one he liked the most was being a school bus driver. So he got to dress up as Santa Claus at Christmas time and drive the bus. And Halloween was always his favorite holiday because he would dress up in goofy costumes. You had to see it. I mean, the kids loved him, though. You know, even to this day, he'd be out in town somewhere at a restaurant, and somebody would come up and, aren't you Chubby? What'd they call him, Chubby? And he left a lasting impression on a lot of people. Excuse me. He was also a poet. And a couple of years after he built his house, he wrote a poem. I'm going to give you, it's quick. So it's entitled Trees. I think that I shall never see my whole yard shaded by a tree. I have a lot of them for all to see, but it just seems they won't grow for me. Such a lovely thing I'm sure you've seen in your neighbor's yard, so tall and green. Down through the sand, the roots will grow until the first spring winds do blow. Then I'll stand there looking straight ahead. By summertime, they'll all be dead. I've done so much to improve the scene, if only my trees would just stay green. From tiny acorn, giant oaks do grow, but from the looks of these, I just don't know. It's a mystery to me that I can't unravel. The next thing I plant will be plain gravel. So they lived on Avenida del Sol for probably about 41 years now. So during that time, they made a lot of great relationships, and with many of their neighbors. They had John that lived down the street. There's Dave and Mary Jewett. They lived across the street with their kids, Sean and Matt. They've been lifelong friends. And Angie, where's Angie? I saw Angie from down the street. So my daughters and I, Genesis and Candace, we lived with them from in the late 80s to the early 90s. So we got to, that's where we know Angie. She's been a lifelong friend to my kids forever. So those were good years for my daughters. They got to bond with my parents, have a special bond. During in the last 10 years, though, it was a little hard for my dad to get around, but he had his walker and he managed to get around town with my mom. But the last few years, it's been a little bit harder for him to get around home, and he spent a lot more time at home. So John helped with my dad a lot. And we appreciate everything that he did. He always helped him with his projects and maintenance and stuff of the house. And we were grateful. And I know he got rewarded a lot with ice cream sandwiches because that was always my dad's job well done, you know. It was gold for him, you know. And across the street, we had Ernie, Marcy, and their son, Nick. And they looked out for my parents. They were always there to help my mom in dire circumstances with my dad. And I thank them for their kindness and their strength and their patience. They'll always be remembered. But I want to thank Heather and Woodson, who live next door. For years, they've shared their family with my parents. Each morning before school, their kids, Kaylee and Cole, would come over and bring their dog Sadie to spend the day. And my dad always had a joke for the kids, and they always had a joke for him. And it made his day. It really made his day. So it meant a lot to him. It's because when I would talk to him on the phone, you two were what he would tell me about. He had to tell me about the joke you guys told him, or the joke he told you. So I thank you. You made an old man happy. So he wasn't always an old man. He was my dad. Sorry. When I was your age, he was my hero. My first memories were of him and his fatigues. I always knew he was a soldier. I thought it was the best job in the world because when he took me to work, it was always to a softball field or a volleyball court or basketball court, you know, and bowling alley. He loved sports, and that's what he did. I thought that's what his job in the Army was, you know. He was a pitcher in a fastball softball league, and even then he was an entertainer. He was always, you know, the clown. So they played a team that didn't know him. His first time up at bat, he would strike out on purpose. You know, he'd stand up there and he would swing all the way around and miss the ball, and you know, he was goofy. But the next time they came up to bat, he would walk out there, stroll out to the plate, and he'd yell out to the pitcher. He goes, "I bet you I can hit a home run." And everybody, all that team, they would laugh and you know, thought, well, here's this big goofball, whatever. So he'd stand at the plate, and that first pitch would come across, he would hit it. He'd hit a home run. That's all I ever saw him hit, was home runs. So, but there again, he played a lot of volleyball, but he played on a beach for a year. That was his first job in the Army, playing volleyball on a beach, you know, in the South Pacific. That's how he became an atomic veteran too. And he bowled. He was about a 220 bowler, but his high game was a 285, and that's pretty impressive. So, but the thing he was the best at, and I know this he was horseshoes. I know that's odd, but he was a championship level horseshoe pitcher. So, and if you didn't know him, you know, he was a hustler also. So he'd throw a couple of games with you and let you win, and then there would be a couple of games where it was kind of close. He might win one, you might win one, and then there'd be the offer, "Hey, you want to bet?" And then they agreed that his toss would change, and it was incredible. So it would be a slow half-quarter turn, and it would drop on top of that spike, the state, every time, ringer after ringer after ringer. So it was amazing what he could do. So that was always fun to watch. He was quite the hustler in more than one sport. I've seen him do that. So he loves sports and kids. He was that neighborhood dad where we always had a basketball hoop over the garage, and I was always out there with him. The neighborhood kids were always out there with us, and we played football in the front yard and croquet. We played croquet. Any game, it didn't matter what it was, he would play it. So when I was in the 6th grade, he went to Korea for a year. So when we played in the driveway, we played in a single car driveway. And I mean, he was a big man. I was a little kid. I could never get near the basket. You know, his arms would be out. He would block me. I couldn't. So I had to practice from the street, you know, shooting. You know. So my 3-point game's pretty good. But when he was gone, I was at school and I learned how to do a fadeaway jump shot. So when he came back, I thought, this is my opportunity. I've got something I could score on him, I know. So we were out there playing that first time, and I dribbled up to him, and he put his arms out. I couldn't get anywhere near the basket, so I stepped back, jumped back, and shot, and swoosh, scored. I thought, yes, I'm gonna beat him. All right. So the next time I had the ball and I was going to try the same thing, I dribble up there, he puts his arms out, and I step towards him. He steps on my foot. I can't go anywhere. I'm back to shooting 3-pointers from the street. So in the house, we play a lot of board games, and I was probably the only 11-year-old that could play cribbage and tonk and gin rummy. You know, I know none of my kids, and even friends knew what the heck it was, but that's what we did in the house. And he was the champion at jacks. You couldn't beat him at jacks because his hands were so big. There's this great big man on the floor playing with us little kids, jacks. He even did it with you girls. You know, he was always fun. Games were entertaining. So, but my favorite story, though, you know, I never liked going to the store when I was a kid, you know, with my mom. I always had to sit in the car, and I hated the store. But if my dad was going, it was an adventure, and I was all aboard. So we'd jump in that Ford station wagon, and we'd get to Kmart, get up through the doors, and my mom would grab a cart and take off, and my dad would look at me, and he goes, I'll give you the 10 to arm yourself. So I would take off. He goes, walk, don't run. So I'm walking through the store, going to the toy department. 1001, 1002, 1003. I get there and I grab a set of cap guns or an air rifle, and I go find a defensive position because I know he's hunting me. So, you know, and at first I used to, I'll just jump out in front of him and I'll shoot him. And first couple of times that happened and I got him, and he would do this dramatic fall to the ground and die, and it was, you know, it was elaborate in the middle of Kmart in an aisle, you know. So, and then I would walk up to him and he would reach out to me. He'd say, tell my mom I loved her. So that's my dad. So, and one time I was going down this aisle, and there was an older man there, and he was pushing a cart, and I went past him, and I heard pop. I turn and look, and it's my dad. He had put on a jacket and a hat and sunglasses. He incorporated disguises to our game. So I learned at that point, next time I'm going to hide in the clothing department. I would lay underneath the clothes and look for his shoes, because they always wore black rope or boots, you know, and I'd jump out and shoot him and get him. But it never failed. People that know him, if you were ever with him, this is pre-cell phones, if you were in a store, a restaurant, no matter where you were, if the telephone rang, he would holler, I got it, and just keep on walking. And that didn't matter where. So, and in Kmart, when this would happen, it would always make me laugh and giggle, and it would always give away my position, you know? So he would track me down and shoot me, and I would lay on the ground, and he would come up there, he would kneel down, and I would playing dead, and then he would kneel down and put his fingers to my neck to check my pulse and then touch my chest, and he would say, rest in peace, soldier. Sometimes he would pick up my lifeless, limp body and carry me through the aisles looking for my mom, you know. So those events, those things always ended exactly the same way. You two, knock it off, let's go. I'm ready. So I spent a lot of time with him. He was active in all my team sports that I played on, and during baseball season, before the game started, we would show up early, and he would hit pop flies to me out in the outfield, and I would work my way back and keep hitting further, and eventually he was hitting home runs over the fence because he had to hit home runs. So I'd jump over the fence, and I spent most of my time on the other side of the fence. But this used to just really annoy me more than anything else that he did, because you know what position I played? I was a pitcher just like him. There was no reason for me to be practicing catching pop flies in the outfield. He told me he was working on my cardio. But he did teach me to throw curveballs and sliders and change-ups, and he had a knuckleball that nobody could hit. So everything he taught me, from shooting to casting a fishing rod to swinging a bat or using tools, he taught me how to do right-handed. I'm left-handed. But I can't tell you how much I appreciate that, because my hustle is so much better than his. Because I can compete with most people right-handed, but when I switch to left, easy money. Especially if you haven't noticed. So thank you, Dad. The first weapons he ever made for me were homemade. The first thing he made me a sling like David slew Goliath with, and I practiced that, and I got good with it. And when I got good with that, he made it out of inner tube and leather. And so when I got with that, he made bullwhip. He made bullwhips. My dad, he was amazing, and he taught me how to pick flowers with bullwhips when I was just a little kid. And from there, I got slingshots, and I got good with that. And when I was 8 years old, I got my first rifle. And I carried that on all our hunting trips for 2 years, but I was never allowed to shoot it unless we were at a rifle range. And I know my sister sitting here, she used to go to the rifle range with us, and at some point today, she will tell one of you that she was a better shot than me. And, yeah, but remember, it was a right-handed semi-automatic rifle. If I shot it left-handed, I was going to get it right in the face. So. There you go. So by the time I was 10, I had a shotgun. We did a lot of hunting. We spent a lot of time together. Those were memorable times. And with Mr. Jenkins over there, he was on a lot of those trips with us. And by the time I was 13, I bought my first 30-06. And we used to go on hunting trips. And my first time I went, he got a deer. And that was, a highlight. But the following year, on that first day, we saw a deer, and he just put his finger up to his lips, and we laid there, we watched it go by, and I said, "Why didn't you shoot it?" He says, "It's the first morning of the first day. We get a deer now. We have to sit in camp, and that's no fun." So we got back to camp on Sunday, and all of his buddies would say, "Hey, Shelby, where's that deer?" And my dad would always tell him he was trophy hunting. Right? He was always trophy hunting. But I know, I spent years and years and years with him hunting. And we saw a lot of deer, and he never took that shot. We just watched. And when I was about 13, he pointed out a deer, and he said, "This was my opportunity. Go ahead and take that shot." So I did. I took that shot. I aimed about 10 feet up above that deer, and the rocks came down, and it chased that deer down in a ravine where it would be safe. And I knew at that point, he knew that I wasn't really interested in the kill. I just enjoyed the hunt and being with him. And on those days, the favorite part of my day was when we took lunch. I mean, I have lots of stories, but we would take lunch and lean back against the hill and look up in the sky and look at the clouds. And he had a great imagination. He could pick out all kinds of things in the clouds, from cartoons or our animals or people we knew, and we would lay there and whisper and giggle and laugh for hours doing that. That for me, that was my favorite part of the trip. We also did a lot of fishing, but when we went fishing, we always catch and release. We never kept the fish because he was way ahead of his time, catch and release. Nobody even knew what that was back then, but he really didn't like fish. His favorite fish was forced fish sticks in between two slices of bread with Kraft sandwich bread and a slice of cheese. Kraft singles if you could get it, huh? So that was him. So, excuse me. So as a kid growing up, we're back home now, and he came up to me one day and he said, "Hey, you know what would be fun? Let's see how fast we can change a tire on the car." So he showed me how to do it, and when I did it, he would time me. He'd make suggestions, ways that I can improve by eliminating wasted steps. So I changed so many tires over the years, practicing in the driveway, and sometimes he would just pull over on the side of the road and have me change a tire. So 7 minutes, that's my best time. From the time I got out of the passenger seat to back into the passenger seat, 7 minutes. And it wasn't until I was a teenager till I realized I was just rotating his tires. But I still have that in me, though. I constantly compete with myself. You know, I'm trying to find the most efficient ways to do everything. No wasted steps. That's been my life. My wife knows that. I have the kitchen set up. It's no wasted steps. And she can see me. She knows I'm counting in my head. And she's like my dad. When she sees me, I'm doing this, and I'm in a routine, and we're in rhythm, and everything's that, she steps in and grabs a glass out of the cabinet, or opens the dishwasher, and I'm like, I have to start all over. So, and it's one of the hardest lessons I ever learned as a husband and as a father. You never, ever want to start a conversation with a girl with, "Hey, you know what would be fun? Let's see how fast we can." Nah, that doesn't work. So, Dad, I'm still the fastest at doing chores. So when I was 12, I asked him if I could have a motorcycle, and he told me, "Sure, go ahead if you figure out how to buy it." So I got a newspaper route, and 4 months later, I bought my first motorcycle. And it was a great lesson for me. So if I wanted something, I had to work for it. If I borrowed money from him, he charged me 25% interest. I mean, I was 8 years old. So that was a great lesson too. I just worked harder and I saved my money. So sometimes he didn't agree with the choices I made or the things that I bought, but he never told me no, or he never stood in my way. He encouraged me ways to figure out what I want and how to take care of it. But the best time of the day was always dinner time. 5:30 every evening. Dinner with my dad, with him, was him working out his comedy routines, where he was Red Skelton mixed with a little bit of Three Stooges. My mom raised us in a Catholic church, so we're Catholics, and he would have to go along sometimes, Christmas and holidays and that sort of thing. So he picked up a couple of prayers, and Greg, my son-in-law back there, who's the only other Catholic in the family. I know he enjoys some of my dad's prayers. Greg, do you have one of my dad's prayers that you can just recite for us?
Dominoes, Visco, my father beat your father in dominoes.
That's it. So, but when he said that at the table, it always ended with a grunt, like, that was my mom kicking him in the leg. So, if you've ever had dinner with us, my dad always sat on the end, my mom always sat to his side, one side or the other. And so whenever he had something funny to say, my mom would kick him, and it would be followed by a grunt. And I used to think about that. So, I mean, he did that every day. He would do that. He would take that. And after a while, I got to thinking about, why? He just never learned. But I dawned on me, that just became part of his act. He knew what he said wasn't funnier than my mom kicking him. That was the funny part of his day. So he made great sacrifices for his career. After 40 years of getting kicked in the leg, he had to get a knee replacement. So earlier I mentioned his imagination. Well, that was with clouds. He saw images in floor tile and wall textures. And he knew all the characters in his house. He could point out, if you were interested, he would show you all the little things that he had found. And just had a great imagination. And out of all the things I learned from him, that was the greatest gift he ever gave me. It's because I see the world the same way. So, Debbie and I built a house here about 3 years ago, and our walls are textured like an Adobe style. And I walked through and I found I have a Spanish conquistador, and Jimmy Durani's in our bathroom. She's shaking her head, you know, she knows. So Jimmy Durani watches her every day, you know. So when my parents came over to my house that first time, my dad walked in, and we have a real wide, long hallway, and he came walking in with a stroller, and my mom's looking around and all that, and my dad gets about halfway down the aisle, and he looks and he goes, "Oh, Don Quixote. He found my conquistador halfway down." So they went about looking at the house, and him and I just walked around and pointed out all the different things we saw. It was just, that was it. So if he was ever in your house and he was walking around and you thought he was looking at the pictures and stuff on your wall, he was looking at the pictures he found in the texture in the walls. That's who he was. So. But many of you have walked out in the desert, especially if you grew up around here, and found, I don't know if you've ever found anything while you're walking around out in the desert. Rick said, "Look what I found." But my dad, when he walked out in the desert, he noticed everything. He found coins, he found cavalry buttons from old uniforms, and he found arrowheads. I counted the other day because I have them. 29. For me, those arrowheads are his trophies. So I treasure them, and I see them every day. I'm the only one that does. So I didn't want to do this today or any other day. I miss him every day. But as I travel the highways and I look up in the sky, I see the cloud-covered skies, and I see Donald Duck being chased by Jaws, or I see Richard Nixon at a microphone doing a duet with John Lennon. I'll know my dad's riding with me. And I'm going to leave you one thing, one last poem. This is my uniform. So this is my dad. 20 years in the Army, it's been a long time, but now I'm hanging up this uniform of mine. The first time I wore it, I was only 18, and when I put it on, it fulfilled the dream. I wore it through some good times and some bad. Sometimes I wore it, for it was all I had. But whenever I wore it, I didn't hide. I wore it in the open, and I wore it with pride. And I wore it walking in the footsteps of loved men, and I had to do it, and if I had to do it all over, I'd wear it again. Yes, I'm hanging up this uniform of mine, but I'm sure to wear it one more time, because when I die, they're burying me in my uniform that I've worn so proudly. So, thank you. Genesis?
Okay. Like my dad said, Grandpa was a poet. He wrote many poems throughout his life. Last summer, he and I sat on the back porch and read through them. I think we counted 39 in all. He wrote about the things he saw, the experiences he had, but mostly he wrote about the people he loved. He even wrote one about me. That one is my favorite. But today, I want to read the one he wrote about his grandpa. It seems fitting for today. It's called Grandpa. "Hello, Grandpa," is what I used to say to the tall man with the hair of gray, a gentle man whose voice he'd never raise, except on Sunday when the Lord he'd give praise. Gray felt hat and bib overalls was everyday dress, because neither one he needed to press. With an old horse the fields he'd plow. When he had time, he'd show me how. He'd plant the crops and gather the hay. There was never enough time in a day. He'd milk the cow and chickens he'd feed, and out in the garden to pull the weeds. At times he'd pick a plum or apple from the tree, one for himself and one for me. Then in the shade, we'd stop for a break, but just a few minutes is all he'd take. It seems his work was never done, and there wasn't time to have some fun. He relaxed at night when I played checkers with him, and it would seem at times he'd let me win. Yes, some things with Grandpa I can recall, but being young, I couldn't remember them all. Still, in my mind, he'll always be, and an image of him I'll always see. It seems that grandpas are very proud men when they have their grandchildren visit with them. Now time has passed, and the years flew, and now I'm a grandpa to just a few, because I've gotten old and my hair is gray. Hello, Grandpa, is what I hear them say. But I find time to have some fun with each of them while they're young. I hope in their minds will be an image of me, of the grandpa that I've tried to be.
So I'm Cindy. I'm Shelby's youngest daughter. I spent a long time trying to figure out what I was going to say, 'cause so many memories like what Joey was going through. And, happy times, hard times, funny times. And poetry was a really big part of his life. And so he wrote a poem, and I wanted to focus in on that memory. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today. In 1972, my dad got orders to be stationed in Korea for a year. I was only 6 years old, and it was very difficult for him to tell me why he was going to be gone for such a long time. He tried to explain that he wouldn't be here for Thanksgiving, for Christmas, or my birthday. And it would be the same time next year that he would see me again. As a child, I could not understand any of that. All I knew was my daddy was leaving, and I was devastated. While he was gone, we did our best to make sure that he was still connected to our lives. We wrote long letters about what we did at school and what we did with our friends. He would write back on that thin onion skin paper that you can cram into an air post envelope, because he wanted to write as much as he could on the postage that he was allowed to send it in. We would make cassette recordings telling him what we did all day, and even included serenades with Sheila playing the guitar and singing, and Joey and I joining in with her. The very first one we did had us singing "I'm Leaving on a Jet Plane" to commemorate his flight, and I got the honored solo of "Oh babe, please don't go." Without us knowing, my mom would make recordings of us playing and talking so that he could still feel present in our daily lives. When my dad returned home, things, of course, were very different. We had all grown up a little bit more and become more independent. It took him a while to settle back into our flow of lives, but eventually he did.
Careful, bud.
And that challenging year became a distant memory.
There.
I don't know when my dad wrote this poem in a poetry. It just always seemed to be there like the rest of his poems. I remember thinking of it when I was a teenager. It's just a cool story that he had written that had me in it. Later as an adult, I realized that my dad didn't just write poems to tell a story, but they were a way for him to convey his feelings in a medium that he felt most comfortable with. This poem conveys how proud my dad was to serve in the U.S. Army, but also expresses the sorrow he felt for having to leave us for so long. A Soldier's Goodbye by Shelby Lewis. The day will come when you have to leave and take your little girl upon your knee. She'll have tears in her eyes for you can see, and all that she sheds, she'll shed for thee. When you hold her tight, you'll hear her say, Daddy, I won't be happy while you're away. Why do you have to go? Why can't you stay? Please, Daddy, please, wait one more day. With a lump in your throat, you'll take her hand and try to find the words that she'll understand of the reasons you have to leave for a faraway land. Because she's too young to know that it's for a free man. You'll try to explain that it wouldn't be long when once again you'll be home. To replace another man that's been gone a year, so he can return to the ones who love him so dear. Someday another little girl like you will shed a tear because her daddy will leave and replace me here. To her, these words seem to satisfy as the tears in her eyes will begin to dry. The other kids, too, will have tears in their eyes as you hug and kiss them and say your goodbyes. Then you'll go to your wife and put your arms around her with these words, I love you, you'll whisper in her ear. You'll hold her close for another minute more, then kiss her again and walk out the door. When you look back, you'll realize right then it will be a year before you'll see them again. But that's not much of a price to pay if it will keep them all safe just one more day. This was my favorite poem, and it really made me realize how much he truly, truly loved the Army. He truly loved being in that camaraderie, even if it meant the sacrifices sometimes for his family. And we all understood that and had to live with that. We grew as different people, having that experience of him showing us the world, like he used to say all the time. And I've grown because of that. I became more outgoing. I was able to talk to more people. I loved the fact that his humor became part of my life because I would talk to other people and they'd say, your dad does that? Like, yeah, that's my dad. But always, he was very much about thinking of other people and what he felt about them. And his poetry is a way that he was able to express that the best. So I treasure that he took a few weeks, I'll see you in a few months, whatever. This helps me understand how he felt about it. So I treasure this poem. Thanks. I love you, Dad.
So if you all would like to join us, we're going over to the American Legion off in Madrid for a little reception, food and drinks. It's over by Apodaca Park of Madrid, just past the park, American Legion on the left-hand side. So look forward to seeing you there if you'd like to join us. Oh, at 12. And is there anybody else who would like to say anything? Nope. All right. Well, thank you, sir. That would be wonderful.
My name is Perry Ashby. I'm the chaplain at the American Legion Post 10. It's 1185 East Madrid, if you're looking for the place. I heard about this guy Shelby for a long time, never got to meet him. And I'm sorry of all the great stories you had that I'm sure you would have got along great. But give rest to the soul of your departed servant Shelby, in a place of light, in a place of green pasture, in a place of refreshment from where pain and sorrow and sightings have fled away. As a good and loving God, forgive every sin he may have committed in word, deed, or thought, for there is no one who lives and does not sin. You are alone without sin. Your righteousness is an everlasting righteousness, and your word is true. And he will wipe every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death, or mourning, or crying, or pain for him, for the old order of things have passed away. And Shelby's probably standing there saying, I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. Now there in store for me the crown of righteousness, for which the Lord, the righteous judge, will award me on that day. Amen. I think we're ready for, we're done.
Are you taking it?